In February 1949, the Philippine Senate reached a breaking point. Facing intense allegations of corruption, Senate President Jose Avelino abruptly banged his gavel, walked off the rostrum, and abandoned the session. 10 Loyalist senators followed him out, leaving only 12 members on the floor. This remaining group immediately designated Mariano Cuenco as the acting Senate president to prevent a total paralysis of the chamber. This maneuver faced an immediate constitutional hurdle. The 1935 Constitution requires a majority of each house to constitute a quorum to do business. At the time, the Senate was composed of exactly 24 members. Because an absolute majority of 24 is 13, the 12 remaining senators lacked the mathematical standing to take any legitimate action. Avelino filed a quo warranto petition with the Supreme Court, seeking to oust Cuenco on the grounds that a session without a quorum cannot legally elect a new president. The crisis created a zero-sum legal paradox. The court could enforce strict mathematical formalism and freeze the legislature, or validate a minority election and risk a direct violation of the Constitution. On March 4th, the Supreme Court issued its first resolution on the Avelino petition. The court invoked the political question doctrine, maintaining that the internal selection of legislative officers was a matter of Senate housecleaning, protected by the separation of powers. With a 6-4 vote, the justices dismissed the petition, explicitly declaring that they lacked jurisdiction to intervene. Legally, a dismissal for lack of jurisdiction ends the matter. Any substantive analysis regarding who the rightful president was should have been rendered void. By refusing to intervene, the court appeared to leave the gridlock intact, with the 12-member Cuenco Senate technically operating outside the bounds of a formal quorum. This introduced the concept of Obiter Dictum, a judicial remark that is not essential to the final decision. Because these remarks are tangents, they do not establish binding legal precedent. Even though the majority had just ruled they had no power to decide the case, 4 of the justices included a multi-page analysis of the quorum math anyway. The resolution formally states, to the first question, jurisdiction, the answer is in the negative. But the justices immediately followed this with a hypothetical. Supposing that the court has jurisdiction, what follows is the opinion of the other 4 on those sub-questions. This maneuver moved past the formalist stance of dissenting Chief Justice Moran, who maintained that 13 remained the only valid number for a quorum. The goal of these 4 justices was to demonstrate how 12 senators could constitutionally function as a majority. This embedded obiter functioned as a strategic signal, providing a theoretical solution to the crisis while the court's hands were still officially tied. The analysis required shifting the Senate from a static integer of 24 to a functional denominator based on who the body could actually reach. We begin with the full 24-member grid established by the Constitution. The 10 senators in the Avelino faction are deducted following their walkout. Senator Vicente Soto was hospitalized in Manila and unable to attend, further reducing the active count. Senator Tomas Confessor was physically located in the United States at the time of the session. This created a legal distinction between Soto and Confessor based on the Senate's power to compel attendance. Because Soto was within the Philippines, he remained subject to the Senate's coercive jurisdiction. The chamber could theoretically arrest him to form a quorum. Confessor, however, was outside the country and beyond the reach of any domestic warrant or coercive process. The justices concluded that the constitutional majority should exclude members who are entirely beyond the coercive jurisdiction of the state. By excluding the functionally unavailable senator, the total functional membership of the Senate drops to 23. An absolute majority of 23 is 12. By shifting the denominator to 23, the 12-member minority was redefined as a constitutionally valid absolute majority. This theory provided the gridlocked Cuenco faction with a path to formal legitimacy. The justices noted that the 12 senators could convene a new session and formally ratify their previous resolutions to remove any doubt of their validity. The Cuenco group followed this roadmap, holding sessions that mirrored the requirements outlined in the court's analysis. This indirect approach respected the separation of powers, as the court was providing a rationale rather than a mandate. This non-binding opinion served as a jurisdictional bypass, allowing the court to troubleshoot the political deadlock without overstepping its formal authority. By mid-March, the legislative standstill had reached a crisis point, with warrants of arrest being openly defied by the striking senators. Recognizing that the gridlock threatened the stability of the republic, the court reconsidered its earlier refusal to act. 7 justices flipped their posture and voted to assume jurisdiction over the quo warranto petition. This shift was driven by justices like Justice Faria, who moved from a dismissal based on jurisdiction to a vote for intervention. The court determined that intervention was now necessary because the Avelino faction was actively blocking all constitutional avenues for the Senate to function. Once the court assumed jurisdiction, they did not need to develop a new rationale for the merits of the case. The theoretical framework required to resolve the dispute had already been established and socialized in the previous week's resolution. This shifted the analysis from Obiter Dictum to ratio decidendi, the core legal rationale that forms binding precedent. The hypothetical math concerning the 23-member denominator was immediately activated as the law of the case. The court formally adopted the 12-member functional quorum as the binding rationale, officially recognizing Cuenco as the Senate president. Avelino v. Cuenco remains a landmark example of a court navigating a political crisis by using non-binding text to signal a resolution. It established that a legislative quorum is a functional reality based on the state's coercive reach, not a static mathematical integer. For legal scholars, the case serves as a reminder that judicial tangents can carry significant weight. Judicial statesmanship often means drafting solutions in the margins, utilizing non-binding dicta to stabilize legal ground before it becomes the law of the land.